I used to think loneliness was something you could see, that it had a shape, a color, but it doesn't. It just sits with you, quiet as dust, while you go about your day. For a long time, my life was small, not in a bad way, just contained. I had my apartment on the third floor of a building that smelled like old wood and someone else's cooking. I had my job at the archives, surrounded by boxes of other people's memories. I had my route to work, left out the front door, past the pharmacy, across the intersection where the light always seemed to catch me, down 2 blocks to the bus stop. Tuesday mornings, I'd buy bread from the bakery on Fletcher Street. The woman there had flour permanently dusted across her forearms. She never asked my name, and I never offered it. We'd exchange the same smile, the same nod. She'd hand me the paper bag, still warm. The transaction took maybe 30 seconds. Then I'd walk home, past the park where the same old man fed pigeons from a paper bag, past the laundromat with its foggy windows and the rhythmic thump of dryers, past the corner store with newspapers stacked outside, past everything that had become so familiar it was almost invisible. There's a certain comfort in that kind of life. No surprises, no disappointments. You know exactly what shape the day will take before you open your eyes. You know the weight of your own footsteps on the stairs, the particular creak of the fourth step, the way the morning light comes through your kitchen window at 7:30, catching the dust motes that spin and settle and spin again. I told myself I was content, and maybe I was, or maybe I'd just forgotten what anything else felt like. It was a Wednesday when I first noticed the notes. I was at my usual table in the cafe on the corner, the one by the window that looks out onto the street where you can watch people passing without them knowing they're being watched. I'd been going there for 3 years, always ordering the same thing: black coffee, no sugar, toast if I was hungry, which usually wasn't. The staff knew me by routine, if not by name. The young barista with the nose ring would start making my coffee when she saw me coming up the block. And that felt fine. Good, even, to be known without having to explain yourself. But that Wednesday, there was a napkin tucked under the salt shaker. Someone had drawn a tiny bird on it in blue pen. Nothing fancy. Just a few quick lines. Wings mid-flight, caught in that moment between rising and falling. It made me smile for reasons I couldn't quite name. I looked around the cafe, but no one was watching. No one seemed to care. People were absorbed in their phones, their newspapers, their own private worlds. I almost threw it away when I left. But I didn't. I folded it carefully, tucking it into my coat pocket, where I'd find it later that evening and remember, just for a moment, that small, unexpected brightness. The next week, there was another one. A little flower this time, simple and crooked, like a child might draw. 5 petals and a stem, slightly off center. Then a coffee cup with steam rising in curling lines, a bicycle leaning against a wall, a cat sleeping in a patch of sun, its body curved into a perfect crescent. I started coming to the cafe more often. Not every day. I didn't want to seem desperate, didn't want to disturb whatever delicate ecosystem had produced these small gifts. But often enough, 3 times a week became 4. 4 became 5. I'd sit at my table and wait, pretending to read whatever book I'd brought, pretending not to hope. Sometimes there'd be a drawing. Sometimes there wouldn't. I learned not to expect them, which somehow made finding them even better. I never caught anyone leaving them. I'd arrive, and there it would be, or there it wouldn't. It became the small, secret thing. This question I carried with me: who and why? And did it matter, or was the not knowing part of the gift? I started keeping them in a drawer at home. By October, I had 17. On a gray afternoon in late October, when the rain was coming down soft and endless, and the cafe windows were fogged with steam, I saw her for the first time. Really saw her, I mean. She'd probably been there all along, occupying the same space, breathing the same air. But I'd been too wrapped up in my own small orbit to notice. She was sitting 3 tables over, by the bookshelf that no one ever looked at. Her sketchpad was open, and her pencil moved in quick, absent-minded strokes. She had paint on her fingers: cadmium yellow, burnt sienna, colors that had seeped into the creases of her knuckles and under her nails. Her hair was pulled back with what looked like a chopstick. She wore a sweater with a hole in the elbow. And when she glanced up, just for a moment, our eyes met. She didn't smile. Neither did I. But something passed between us. A recognition, maybe. Or permission. An acknowledgement that we both existed in this space. At this time. For our own private reasons. I didn't say anything. I've never been good at starting conversations with strangers. The words tangle up somewhere between my brain and my mouth, and by the time I've figured out what to say, the moment has usually passed. But I watched her from the corner of my eye as she worked. The way she'd pause sometimes, pencil hovering above the page, considering. The way she'd tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, leaving a smudge of graphite on her temple. The next time I came in, I brought a postcard I'd found in a secondhand bookshop. It had a painting of the sea on it, all blues and grays, the kind of stormy ocean that looks both dangerous and beautiful. There was no message on the back. I didn't know what I'd write even if I wanted to, but I left it on her table when she went to the bathroom, my heart beating stupidly fast, like I was 15 again and passing notes in class. When I sat back down, I pretended to read my book, something about the history of map making that I'd been working through for weeks. But I watched from the corner of my eye as she came back, picked up the card, turned it over in her hands. She looked around the cafe, and when her eyes found mine, she held up the card. A small nod, a smaller smile, that was all. But it felt like enough. We didn't become friends right away. It wasn't like that. There was no conversation where we exchanged names and histories and decided to know each other, but we started sharing space differently. She'd nod when I came in, I'd nod back. Sometimes she'd shift her bag from the chair beside her, and I'd understand that as an invitation. I'd sit, and we'd work in parallel, her sketching, me reading, or writing lists of things I needed to do but probably wouldn't. After 2 weeks of this, she showed me what she was working on, a series of drawings of the cafe. The barista mid-laugh, head thrown back. The old man who came in every afternoon at 3 and ordered chamomile tea. The particular way the light came through the window at 4 o'clock, cutting across the tables in golden strips. "These are beautiful," I said, and meant it. She shrugged. "I like drawing ordinary things, the stuff people don't usually pay attention to." I told her about my job at the archives, how I spent my days cataloging old documents, letters mostly, written by people who'd been dead for 50 or 100 years. Their shopping lists, their love letters, their complaints about the weather, people's ordinary lives preserved in ink and paper. "I like that," she said, "that the ordinary things get saved, that they matter." Her name was Marion. She told me on a Thursday in November, casual as anything, like she'd assumed I'd known all along. I told her mine, and she repeated it quietly, testing the shape of it in her mouth. Winter came slowly, then all at once. The cafe started putting cinnamon in the coffee. Someone hung fairy lights around the window, the small white kind that made everything look softer, less harsh. Marion began sitting at my table instead of hers. Not every time, but often enough that it became a thing we did. We'd work in comfortable silence, her sketching, me reading, or sometimes just watching the street outside, the people hurrying past with their collars turned up against the cold. Sometimes we'd talk, about small things mostly, the weather, a film she'd seen at the old theater on Maple Street, a story I'd read about a woman who'd walked across an entire country just to see what it looked like. Nothing profound, but it filled the space in a way I hadn't realized I needed. She told me once, on an afternoon when the cafe was nearly empty and the rain was drumming steadily against the windows, that she'd moved to the city 3 years ago after her marriage ended, that she'd spent the first year barely speaking to anyone, that drawing in the cafe had been a way to feel less alone, without having to explain herself to anyone, without having to perform being okay. I understood that. The not wanting to explain. The exhaustion of having to translate your interior life for other people. I told her about my sister, who lived 2,000 miles away and called every Sunday like clockwork. How we'd talk for exactly 20 minutes about nothing important, and how that felt like both a lifeline and a kind of loneliness. Being known but not really. Being connected but still fundamentally alone. Marion nodded. She understood. One evening in December, as we were both packing up to leave, her sliding her sketchbook into a canvas bag covered in paint stains, me folding my newspaper, She asked if I'd ever been to the botanical gardens. I said I hadn't, though I'd lived in the city for 15 years and passed the gardens probably 1,000 times. She laughed, not unkindly, and said we should go sometime, that they kept the greenhouses open year round, that it was like stepping into summer even when everything outside was frozen and gray. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. We went on a Sunday 2 weeks before Christmas. It was cold but bright, one of those winter days where the sky is so blue it almost hurts to look at, and everything looks sharper, more defined. We met at the entrance, and Marion had brought coffee in a thermos that we shared back and forth as we walked. The gardens were nearly empty, just us and a few other people who moved like ghosts through the pathways, quiet and reverent. We walked slowly through the greenhouses, surrounded by plants that had no business surviving in this climate. Orchids and ferns and trees from places I'd never been. Marion pointed out the ones she liked. A cactus flowering improbably pink against its spined green body. Ferns unfurling like questions being asked. A tree with bark that peeled away in papery strips, revealing smooth wood underneath. I mostly just listened, watched the way she moved through the world, noticing things, paying attention, finding beauty in the small and overlooked. At one point, she stopped in front of a small tree with silver green leaves that caught the light. "This is my favorite," she said. "It's called an olive tree. They can live for hundreds of years, thousands even. They're almost impossible to kill." We stood there for a while, not saying anything, just being near something old and patient and alive, something that had survived simply by continuing. When we left, the sun was setting, turning the sky pale orange and pink. We walked to the bus stop together, our breath making clouds in the cold air. Marion pulled out her sketchbook and tore out a page. She handed it to me without ceremony. It was a drawing of us, sitting at our table in the cafe. She'd drawn it from memory, the angle of the light, the way I hunched over my book, the coffee cups between us. I looked younger in it than I felt, happier maybe, less closed off. "Thank you," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. Because the words I wanted to say felt too big, too unwieldy. She shrugged. "You've been good company." That became something we did. The gardens on Sundays. Sometimes we'd walk for hours, sometimes just 30 minutes. We'd get coffee after, or sometimes lunch at a place Marion knew that made good soup. We fell into a rhythm, a pattern. And patterns, I was learning, didn't have to be lonely. They could be something else, something warm. I still have that first drawing. It's pinned to the wall above my desk, next to the napkin with the bird. Next to it, I've added others. Small sketches Marion would tear out and hand to me when she'd filled a page. A portrait of the barista, the view from her apartment window, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup. I don't know if Marion and I will be friends for years or just for this season of our lives. I don't know if this is the beginning of something or just a chapter, but I've learned that maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's enough to sit with someone in a cafe on a rainy afternoon, to walk through gardens in winter, to share the small, forgettable moments that somehow add up to something you remember. My life is still small. I still walk the same streets, buy bread on Tuesday mornings, catalog old letters written by people who are long gone, but it feels different now, lighter somehow. Like a door I didn't know was closed has opened just a crack, letting in air and light and the possibility of surprise. I've started noticing things I used to walk past. The way the evening light falls across the buildings, turning brick into something golden. The sound of someone laughing in the apartment above mine. The precise blue of the sky on a clear morning. The weight of the bread in my hands on Tuesday mornings. The particular smell of the archives. Paper and dust and time. And sometimes when I'm sitting at my table in the cafe, waiting for Marion to arrive with her bag of sketchbooks and her paint-stained fingers, I'll catch someone else's eye, a stranger, alone with their coffee, staring out the window at nothing in particular. And I'll think about leaving them a small drawing, a bird maybe, or a flower, or just a simple line that suggests movement, life, the possibility of flight. Just to say, I see you. You're not alone. Someone is paying attention. I haven't done it yet, but I think about it. And that feels like something, like a small seed planted, like the beginning of a pattern that might someday become something else entirely. The barista knows both our names now. She asks about Marion when I come in alone, and I like that. Being connected to someone in that way, being part of a we, even a small one. Last week, Marion brought me a gift, a small sketchbook with blank pages and a pencil tucked into the spine. In case you want to try, she said, you don't have to be good at it. That's not the point. I haven't drawn anything yet. But the sketchbook sits on my table, next to my coffee, next to my book. A possibility. An invitation to see the world the way Marion sees it. To pay attention. To notice. To capture the small moments before they disappear into the vast sea of forgotten things. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. This quiet, ordinary life, made luminous by the simple fact of sharing it.